Week after week, there's an ominous shadow that lurks just beneath the surface of the YouTube comments. A subtle imitation of the fear that plagues my mind. If it doesn't exist, it can't hurt me, right? Because I know that dwelling on it will only make the eventual arrival all the worse. I file it into my mental spare cabinet, like a bill I haven't paid yet. But on the edge of sleep, when the wall holding back the roiling subconscious at bay starts to flag instability, it trickles through the gaps in my makeshift defenses, and whispers of that fear find their way to me, poisoning my thoughts with the knowledge of the inevitable. And then one day, it actually finally wins the comment votes. So Judgment Day is here now, and I can't ignore it anymore. Mewtwo is here. In this video, we'll talk about the following formats. Oh boy, buckle in guys, because it's a really long one. There are certain memories from when we're young that act as touchstones we come back to for the rest of our lives. One of those memories is a raised platform in a cave, holding a solitary figure. When you finally catch Mewtwo, it's the culmination of an entire journey, and the fact that there's probably nothing left to beat in the game doesn't mean anything, because that terrifying power is more than capable of obliterating your friends. It's not just that Mewtwo has no weaknesses in Gen 1, although let's be honest, when your worst trait is that one stat you have is under 100, you're doing alright on that front. It's that it takes advantage of every single stupidly broken thing in the original games to be the best. Psychic typing, an absurd special stat, access to arguably the two best moves in the game, in Blizzard and Amnesia, Mewtwo lives up to its name of being engineered to be perfect. While its standard set consisting of the perfect fusion of those things was capable of destroying entire teams with a single boost, and if you really wanted, reaching 999 special after 2, Mewtwo did have other options. What else did you expect? And with stat XP over EVs, it was free to specialize however it wanted. Throw in Thunderbolt or Submission to beat water psychic types like Starmie and Slowbro, or punch through Chansey and Snorlax's defenses. Go full physical if you really wanted, utilizing the devastating power of a 110 attack Hyper Beam. And speaking of that one weakness, you could opt to eliminate it entirely with Barrier, which when paired with Recover and Thunder Wave, meant Mewtwo would stick around forever and just win through firing off psychics unless the opponent critted through its defenses. Substitute also deserves a special mention. While it's not amazing in normal battles, in Pokemon Stadium it was updated to its current status immune form, bypassing the one other way to beat Mewtwo. And speaking of which, that was probably the only way you were going to take down this monster. There's not a single counter to Mewtwo in Gen 1. Really, Chansey's monstrous special is the best bet, but if Mewtwo is packing Submission, you're dead to rights. And Chansey's still not going to beat Mewtwo one-on-one. It's purely aiming for a freeze, and the bad news is that Mewtwo has a better boosting move and a higher critical rate, so you're statistically probably going to lose that battle. And this is a trend. Starmie and Slowbro can resist Blizzard and Psychic, but what else are they gonna do? Well, probably Thunder Wave it. The only way to stop Mewtwo is to paralyze it, or if you're lucky, get the freeze. And once paralyzed, maybe, just maybe, your Tauros or something can take it down, since otherwise it outspeeds, every Pokemon except for 3 of them. And only Electrode outsped Mewtwo. Jolteon and Aerodactyl were just tied with it. Alright, so you've paralyzed Mewtwo. It somehow doesn't have an Amnesia up, and your Tauros is in. Time to win. Oh, it used rest. Well, it's back to full health and faster again. Mewtwo is the best Pokemon in Gen 1 bar none. Run it however you want. It will likely win. Outside of power constraining armor or a second clone, you likely weren't beating this thing. After all, it's smart enough to speak. The only other Pokemon we've seen do that are Meowth and, some things are best left forgotten. Of course, Mewtwo's power came in forgetting, but Gen 2 put some form of limiter on it by toning down the raw power of Amnesia. The 64-point drop to its special defense didn't help either. And that wasn't all. Generation 2 had specifically introduced Psychic-type counters in Dark and Steel types, and in a metagame full of special walls like Blissey and Snorlax, Mewtwo wasn't quite capable of just blasting through the opposition and boosting up when it needed to. What's more, Mewtwo was no longer the only one lurking around Ubers with Mom anymore. There were new invaders into its cozy home now, invaders with 154 special defense. So Mewtwo took a page out of Snorlax's book itself and most frequently ran a Curse set. Even with just one physical move, Curse allowed for Mewtwo to cushion up its physical defense and make for submissions that would destroy its biggest counters. The aforementioned Blissey, Snorlax, Tyranitar, and Umbreon. Then when Ho-Oh or Lugia came in, you blasted it with Thunderbolt, which still hurt pretty bad. Of course, you got its Stab Psychic, Fire Blast power against Celebi, and Shadow Ball's ability to hit Ghost type super effectively. Yeah, those are all attractive. But the benefit of hitting Lugia and Ho-Oh hard was too good to pass up, especially with Skarmory roaming around. The fact that Mewtwo actually had to work to get KOs this time meant it had a bit more of a specific role. It couldn't just come in willy-nilly and blow things to smithereens anymore. Instead, it was a powerful late-game cleaner because of its incredible mixed attacking stats. Once its biggest obstacles had been cleared, it was free to run rampant again. Although things might go off with a few more hitches from Mewtwo, it still didn't really have any true counters. Umbreon could try to stall it out with Charm, but if it took too many submissions, it was toast. The move Submission was actually the key here. Without it, any special wall would beat it. As before, the the best way to deal with this menace was to cripple it and then eliminate it after the fact. And if you didn't, your face was getting rearranged, or your mind was getting blown up. And man, can't a legendary cat thing get its space anymore? Gen 3 saw Mewtwo's exclusive Ubers club invaded by a bunch of would-be phonies, and some of them psychic types no less, even a non-legendary. But these newbies weren't there to mess around. Latios and Latias had a higher effective special attack than Mewtwo, after the boost from Soul Dew. Why did we ever think that item was okay? And Deoxys attack didn't even need the boost to dethrone Mewtwo from its position as the strongest special attacker in the game. So what did Mewtwo have going for it? Well, that depends who you were comparing it to. In the case of the Laddies, the ability to outspeed them and attack from the physical end of the spectrum made Mewtwo not only more unpredictable, but also a great check to the twins itself. Against Deoxys attack, the disparity was pretty obvious. Deoxys attack may have been able to run any type of all-out attacking set under the sun, but running any sort of bulky set was out of the question. Enter Mewtwo, whose mutations had by this point given it a broad range of gene expression that allowed for it to slot nicely into a variety of roles. While Deoxys attack wasn't able to make use of sets needing ample setup because of its abysmal defenses, Mewtwo's 101 HP substitutes and decent bulk meant it was pretty suited for a Calm Mind set that destroyed any hope Blissey or Deoxys defense had at stalling it out. Calm Mind, Substitute, and Recover was such a deadly combo that Mewtwo only needed one move, usually Ice Beam, since Psychic wasn't a great attacking type in Ubers. And if you wanted more coverage, you could always make setting up a bit harder, but make the sweeping easier by adding in Thunderbolt or Thunder over one of the support moves. With this set, you gain coverage on Ho-Oh and Kyogre as well. Thunder versus Thunderbolt was actually a hard decision. Now, do you want to grab the guaranteed Thunder on Kyogre switches, or risk a miss against a potentially sun-boosted Ho-Oh? Either way, this set could get in safe, and it was even harder to stop. Now let's make it clear, Calm Mind was not a unique option in Ubers. It's not like Mewtwo was special for running it. Latias, Lugia, Blissey, they all had Calm Mind, well, on the mind. One thing that set Mewtwo apart, however, was its access to taunt. Drop Substitute, do that little spin Mewtwo does in melee when he taunts, and suddenly every matchup against another boosting Pokemon is a winning one. Recover their moves and boost up while they can't. But this is a Pokemon meant to be perfect on all fronts, and so it's not just the special side it dominated. Along with the quintessential special booster, Mewtwo also had access to the all-purpose physical boost of Bulk Up. The primary draw of this set was a boosted Shadow Ball, making Mewtwo a bona fide counter to opposing psychic types like Lugia and the Laddies. And the physical investment meant beating Blissey didn't rely on beating it at its own stall game if you took Brick Break or Earthquake. Past that, it was all preference. Recover to beat other psychics harder, Taunt if you wanted to avoid status and beat walls, Ice Beam for Rayquaza and bait, or even Self-Destruct, which was especially devastating off of Mewtwo's 100 base attack. And while Choice Specs and Scarf weren't around yet, there was no way Mewtwo wasn't making use of Choice Band. This afforded immediate power. If you could predict switches, this Mewtwo would put the hurt on with its in-your-face raw destructive energy. Shadow Ball for Psychics, Earthquake to beat Tyranitar and Metagross, and then Self-Destruct to annihilate anything that dared get in the Blast Zone. Once again, the last move was up to preference. Do you want to hit even harder on the switch with Focus Punch? Murder Blissey with Brick Break? Lure and then Flamethrower on Skarmory? Your choice. And finally, maybe the set that most epitomizes Mewtwo's adaptability, Stall Breaker. No attacking investment here, this was a fully defensive set, made to beat the infamous Skarm Bliss and notoriously strong defensive Pokemon like Lugia and Ubers. Mewtwo's gargantuan move pool, great speed, and decent bulk meant it could easily shut down opposing stall Pokemon with Taunt, while whittling away with Toxic and keeping itself safe with Substitute or Recovery. As your opponent tried to constantly switch between their defensive pivots, Taunt would negate any hope they had of setting up, letting you get another free hit as their Substitute stayed unbroken. It was this variety that kept Mewtwo at the top of Ubers, despite its nominal outclassing by other Pokemon. Figuring out Mewtwo's moveset was half the battle, and so the best solutions to Mewtwo were defensive Pokemon like Deoxys Defense and Blissey. Although Blissey did have to fear Brick Break, the best removal tool for Mewtwo was Banded Deoxys Attack, which could predict a Calm Mind or Bulk Up or Taunt, and frequently fire off a one-hit KO Shadow Ball, but any attacking move killed it. And Banded Ho-Oh was also able to withstand anything but an exploding Mewtwo, responding with Shadow Ball while the Mewtwo was only able to return fire with a possible Thunderbolt. Kyogre worked similarly, fearing mostly only Thunder, but again, the unpredictability and raw strength of Mewtwo made it nigh uncounterable, and the risk of figuring out its set was often all the gap it needed to win a battle. If that Mewtwo was carrying Thunder, yeah, you just lost potentially your most powerful Pokemon. Honestly, one of the best ways to deal with it was Wobbuffet, since by then you knew the set and could just wipe your hands and be done with it. This was still indubitably one of the best Pokemon in the game, behind Groudon and Kyogre, yes, and sometimes even behind its fellow Psychic types, but still one of the scariest threats you could face, even in the Ubers tier. And do you guys know how evolution actually takes place? No, not Pokemon evolution, actual evolution. Random mutations that help something survive better end up getting passed along because it can live. What that means is that the hazardous conditions something lives in can actually affect how it will change down the line, because mutations that fit that niche work the best. Mewtwo just keeps on mutating. Gen 4 Ubers was outright terrifying because of the introduction of even more Uber Pokemon. You had Darkrai spreading sleep status at absurd absurd levels, Dialga leveraging the most absurd typing the world had ever seen, and Giratina serving as a dual spin blocker and attacker. And yet, Mewtwo just keeps on adapting. The new move in Aura Sphere was the reason for Mewtwo's continued position at the top of the lot. With 5 speed over Darkrai, Mewtwo was arguably the best revenge killer for arguably one of the best Pokemon in the game. So, it was arguably pretty damn good. That only applied to certain sets though. Mewtwo's unique combo of Taunt and Calm Mind could actually have trouble with Scarf Darkrai, but the potential benefits were too good to be passed up. As in the past generation, this set annihilated walls because they literally couldn't do anything after being taunted. And as you might have come to expect, Mewtwo strayed away from stab in favor of better coverage, usually Aura Sphere and Ice Beam, to handle Darkrai, Dialga, Lugia, Giratina, the list goes on. That combo was powerful. And of course, you could also run a more aggressive Calm Mind set utilizing Life Orb over leftovers. That shift meant Mewtwo was able to nab important KOs before a boost with Ice Beam, such as Rayquaza, Garchomp, and Shaman. Setting out Calm Mind was significantly harder of course, but once you did, your newfound power meant all Pokemon were dust before Mewtwo, especially since you'd have Thunder as an additional coverage move. That turned Kyogre, one of Mewtwo's greatest adversaries, into complete bait. On the other end of the spectrum, if you were really committed to setting up and wanted to be able to do so against more offensive threats, you could spec into Bulk and a support option like Substitute or Recover for ease of play at the cost of power. This allowed Mewtwo to beat revenge killers and pursuit users, two of the only things it feared, while simultaneously retaining the ability to beat Blissey through the use of 101 HP subs. We've already talked about 3 distinct options, and that's just the Calm Mind sets. We still got a ton more to go. Mewtwo had 3 attacking routes that didn't necessitate setup either. Here, Mewtwo saw fit to make the common strategies of the generation acceptable: Life Orb, Choice Scarf, and Choice Specs. The Life Orb set is the easiest to understand, as it's very similar to the Life Orb Calm Mind set. The main difference is the appearance of Self-Destruct, which provided a way to defeat anything that would normally want to come in on Mewtwo. Ho-Oh, Blissey, and Kyogre all died to this, and the fact that Mewtwo would normally blow up on Kyogre meant that Thunder was no longer the most desired coverage move. Usually, Fire Blast was taken instead to deal with Pokemon like Scizor and Fortress. Choice Scarf, as to be expected, made Mewtwo one of the most feared revenge killers in the game. Moves here were selected from the usual pool: Ice Beam, Thunder, Flamethrower, Aura Sphere, and Grass Knot, depending on your targets. Ice Beam for Rayquaza, Thunder for Kyogre, Grass Knot for Groudon, Aura Sphere for Darkrai, all pretty self-explanatory. Usually, however, you forewent at least one attacking move to hold the potential gut-sinking play of tricking your Scarf onto a Blissey or Latias. Finally, Specs was just a Life Orb set but dialed up to 11. Take your pick of attacking moves and let her rip. Anything switching in not named Blissey had to be fearful, and even Blissey hated getting tricked into Specs. Sorry, did I say finally? My bad, we have one more trio of sets to discuss. Far be it from Mewtwo to forego a route it might have specialized into. It can do it all. By tapping into its vast gene pool, move pool, Mewtwo had the ability to be a fearsome wall as well. Will-O-Wisp, Reflect, Taunt, and Recover had every physical attacker cursing under their breath and beat out most stall Pokemon as well. If you really needed an attacking move, it was often Reflect that was dropped. Similarly, Mewtwo could specialize into the specially defensive end of the spectrum simply by swapping some EVs around for Light Screen, although Toxic often took the place of Will-O-Wisp as well. Either way, Mewtwo could play the wall role surprisingly well. Hell, it could even throw up both walls and then just explode on people, taking on a full support role that aped Deoxys speed but brought more HP to the table. So that's our trio of trio sets. And here's the thing with Mewtwo. While in the past it was uncounterable because there was simply nothing that matched up to its terrifying perfect combination of moves, that wasn't true anymore. Now it was just uncounterable because it could always potentially have the moves to beat you, but it also might not. Blissey was the most evident threat to strong special attackers as a special wall, yeah, you get it. But then of course Taunt sets ended it, and Substitute sets did even better. The Self-Destruct eliminated it outright. Scizor and Metagross resisted most of Mewtwo's moves and threatened hard with Bullet Punch and Pursuit, but it could always have a fire type move to beat them, and it was faster. Tyranitar also fit the bill of the Pursuit Abuser, but boosted up Mewtwo Aura Spheres would tear through it. On the other hand, the Calm Mind sets had huge issues against tanky attackers like Kyogre and Ho-Oh, and they could outpower the defensive sets as well, but then again, Thunder posed serious problems to them, as did Self-Destruct, especially if coming off of a Life Orb or Specs. And finally, Scarfers or Status Abusers did well, unless of course you were facing a stall Mewtwo, or if it had Substitute again. You get the picture? There was a solution to every set, but even those threats did horribly against the other variants. Case in point, Darkrai. Scarf Darkrai destroyed any sort of all-out attacker, but Mewtwo itself beat out Darkrai with a Scarf, or in the case of both being non-scarfed, it won straight up. Mewtwo's biggest problem was actually that it didn't have enough move slots. Imagine a boosting Life Orb set that also had room to taunt and substitute. Unstoppable. But then again, Mewtwo may have been around for a while, but that didn't mean it wasn't a top-tier threat. This old cat had learned a few new tricks, and it was still one of the strongest Pokemon in the entire game. And if you really wanted to see something special, take a look at Worlds 2010. Mewtwo wasn't allowed in VGC often due to its crazy crazy power level, in addition to its other fellow Ubers. And when it has been actually allowed in VGC, you typically saw stuff like Kyogre and Groudon beating it out for spots on the team anyways. That is, unless you're a Huey Ha, who managed to take a team using Trick Room Mewtwo alongside Parasect, of all things, to make 5th place at Worlds. Huey forwent speed so he could fully invest into bulk and live water spouts from Kyogre, only to surprise the enemy because he ended up being faster and more powerful. And it was a little bit of poetic justice that it was paired with Parasect too. Back in Gen 1, people actually used to say Parasect was one of the greatest threats to Mewtwo just because it had Spore and a bug typing. And that wasn't really true, but its synergy alongside Trick Room Mewtwo was something to be believed. Honestly, this Mewtwo almost looks like a Gen 1 throwback. Blizzard and Self-Destruct provided so much destructive power, it was reminiscent of the glory days. Aaron Cybertron Zhang told us this is probably his favorite VGC team of all time, and we can see why. Huey's been around a long time, so it only makes sense he'd use the OG to achieve success. Now luckily for Mewtwo, Gen 5 gave it one more of those adaptations it needed, Side Strike. And what an adaptation it was. While Mewtwo's all-out attacking Life Orb set had previously been held back by its inability to beat Blissey and other special walls like Kyogre, Side Strike's defensive targeting meant Mewtwo would get you with the mental left hook right when you thought the straight was coming. This was an absolutely enormous change. Remember how I said Mewtwo suffered from having too many move syndrome? Side Strike made Taunt and Substitute obsolete because it let Mewtwo just beat special walls all on its own. Every all-out attacking set now had the benefits that the semi-defensive sets had, with the old reliable combo of Aura Sphere, Ice Beam, and Calm Mind. And with Self-Destruct nerf, Mewtwo would have needed a new physical move anyways. Honestly, going for 4 attacking moves with Fire Blast was probably better than Calm Mind, when you can hit everything super effectively or with your 100 base power stab moves. Boosting isn't quite as important, because you can become effectively uncounterable. If you really wanted to set up, you might as well invest in Mewtwo's great auxiliary moves and use Recover to help. And while a bulky Calm Mind user with Side Strike would have far more counters because of its loss of 2 coverage moves, it also became an even more potent late game cleaner and could hold its own against opposing Calm Mind users, especially since Side Strike ignored their boosts entirely. Getting this in successfully against another boosting mod could be checkmate. Side Strike also only benefited Mewtwo's status as a revenge killer, making it one of the best in the game. But the problem with using Mewtwo as a revenge killer was that you weren't using a Mewtwo that wasn't a revenge killer. Giving up the ability to switch moves was hard. This was the same reason the Choice Spec set fell out of vogue. Mewtwo was pretty good when you didn't lock it into a move. In fact, it was one of the best stall Pokemon in the game as well. Mewtwo may not have needed Taunt for its attacking sets anymore, but it was still perfectly capable of using it in other ways. Taunt, Recover, Will-O-Wisp still made for a deadly combo. To round it out, Mewtwo has always had choices. Side Strike, Light Screen if you wanted to guard on both sides, or Substitute to deal with status, which was absolutely its biggest weakness. So to start out in the counter section, and with that out of the way, can you guess what I might say next? No counters. So let's talk about its checks. Genesect was here to try and take over Mewtwo's status as the best engineered legendary on the block, and its ability to beat Mewtwo with a Choice Scarf and a download boost meant it at least kept it in check. In fact, things that outsped Mewtwo were, as always, the best ways to beat it. On that front, Kyurem Black, Zekrom, Ho-Oh, Kyogre, and Reshiram, all choiced of course, were your best bets. Giratina Origin Form could also use Shadow Sneak to hit Mewtwo first, and Victini resisted all moves and hit hard with V-Create. But its own middling defenses meant that switching into Mewtwo was a risky proposition. The greatest true counter Mewtwo had was the rare defensive Arceus Dark. And a quick note, Arceus is only making its appearance now because the only version of it available in Gen 4 was EV limited, so it wasn't really seen much in Gen 4. But it was a frequent contender for Gen 5, meaning Mewtwo had to be wary of it. Arceus Dark's payback was one thing, but Psychic did even better, beating the Calm Mind variant of the all-out attacker set easily. But it had to be on the lookout for Fire Blast. Similarly, Jirachi won if Mewtwo couldn't melt its steel, as did other Pokemon with the same typing. Many of those threats, however, lost to Stall, which dealt with setup Pokemon and physical attackers equally well, but suffered against fire types and special attackers who didn't care about Will-O-Wisp. With the advent of Side Strike, Mewtwo had everything it needed. Not that it didn't already though. I'm sure you're used to me saying this already, but yeah, once again, one of the best to do it. Alright, next. And if that wasn't enough, they gave it a Mega Evolution. But not one, but 2 Mega Evolutions. Guaranteed that Mewtwo's unstable DNA had a few more tricks left in it. However, the unpredictability that had defined Mewtwo was reined in a little bit. In order to gain access to either of its Mega Evolutions, it gave up the options to go fully defensive or choice. And to be honest, new Mega Pokemon and fairies like Xerneas, who had a great type matchup, made those options harder to pull off. So for the first time since, like what, Gen 2? Mewtwo only had a couple sets that you had to be really prepared for. But don't let that fool you though. If you guessed wrong, you might be stuck in a ditch you'd be hard pressed to find your way out of, since you'd be facing the wrong move from Pokemon with the highest attack stats in the game. So let's cover Mega Mewtwo X first. With an additional fighting typing, Low Kick, a move incredibly good in Uber since stuff is, well, big, became a 100 accuracy, 120 power stab move, coming off of a 190 base attack. That should be enough to sell you on its own, but X also had Earthquake and Ice Punch for incredible coverage, and Stone Edge if you really wanted to kill Ho-Oh. The last move slot was reserved for Mewtwo's old trick up its sleeve, Taunt, guaranteeing the only way to kill this thing was by brawling with it, and brawling with something with 190 attack and 130 speed might be a little risky. Now for Special Mewtwo, and yes, I do say special instead of Mega Mewtwo Y for a reason. If you were running all-out attacker Mewtwo, you actually still wanted to use Life Orb instead of its Mega Stone, because the power ended up being better, and this only happened on the special set because it was a smaller relative boost in power, given Mewtwo's existing astronomical special attack and the important fighting type stab that X gained. The main moves on this set were Side Strike and Focus Blast, which had replaced Aura Sphere as power creep continued, and if you were going Life Orb, you likely closed that out with Ice Beam and Fire Blast, though Shadow Ball was a good option for pesky psychic types. Of course, the two moves we keep mentioning are Taunt and Calm Mind, and if you used either of those, Mewtwo Y was the preferred choice for its extra speed and the fact that you weren't relying on Life Orb for damage. You've heard enough of these moves already. Taunt beat out opposing Calm Minders in status, while Calm Mind provided sweeping power in spades. Oh, and it got Insomnia, meaning Darkrai and Smeargle were significantly less scary. Now when talking about threats, you already know there's nothing guaranteed, and that's especially true when you have such dramatically different, terrifying, powerful sets to prepare for. For the special attacker set, Dark Arceus still did pretty well since it could come in and Calm Mind to resist a Focus Blast, but that still put a dent into it. Veltal similarly could come in on Side Strike and threaten hard, but hated getting hit by Low Kick or Ice Beam. Mega Sableye was immune to Taunt due to Magic Bounce and could spam Recover, but if Mega Mewtwo Y was carrying Calm Mind, it would boost up and win. Fairy types like Xerneas and Arceus exploited Mega Mewtwo X's fighting typing to hit it hard and won if something crazy like Poison Jab wasn't on the set. And Ghost types like Aegislash, Giratina Origin Form, and Arceus Ghost all had to be careful on the switch, but were powerful checks because they were immune to Low Kick. Similarly, bulky Psychic types could wall but not threaten too much, which sometimes was good enough. Wobbuffet in particular was a strong solution if you had figured out the set and could get off an Encore. And finally, Revenge Killers in status, the age-old solve to Mewtwo. If you can't beat them, avoid them entirely and beat them on the switch-in. Classic stuff. And speaking of classic, a few people decided to channel Huey and use Mewtwo for 2016 VGC. Gary Quinn took Mewtwo to 11th place at US Nationals. Throwback to Huey's Groudon Mewtwo team, but this time with a Primal Groudon. Just as on that team, Mewtwo served as a great counter to many of Groudon's enemies, such as Rayquaza, Kyogre, and Salamence. This also made use of Mewtwo's hidden ability, Unnerve, which allowed Venusaur Sleep Powders to bypass Lum Berries and other moves to ignore the type-resistant berries. Gary didn't battle any Rayogre variants on his way to 11, but has said himself that Mewtwo's matchup against common Pokemon in that team setup like Landorus, Gengar, and Crobat was one of the reasons he built the team. Finally, Riccardo Apamea took a team with Mewtwo and Mega Ray to win an Italian regional. Mewtwo in Gen 7 is almost exactly the same as Gen 6. All that matters is that there's new threats it has, including Lunala and Necrozma Dawn Wings, which beat out Mega Mewtwo Y easily if it doesn't have Shadow Ball, and fires off Moongeist beams to give it a taste of its own special attacking medicine. The ability Shadow Shield combined with its high special defense also mean they can come in easily, while their Ghost typing helps out against Low Kick. Of course, opposing Shadow Ball and Brutal Swings are possibilities, but with Mewtwo, everything is. Necrozma Duskmane and Solgaleo similarly can come in on certain variants of Mewtwo and fit the role of steel types that win as long as there's not a Fire Blast or Taunt in play, statusing Mewtwo and hitting it back. In recent times, Mars Shadow has contributed heavily to Mewtwo's decline in Ubers due to the huge Technician boosted Shadow Sneaks and Spectral Thief, which steals any Calm Mind variant's boost. But as always, Mewtwo is incredible. It may be the least incredible it has ever been, and that's less because it's good and more because it takes up a Mega slot, which could be used by something like Lucario or Salamence, which is also why it didn't appear in doubles a lot. It's still up there in the high usage stats of Ubers, where it's been since we first discovered it all those years ago in a cave outside Cerulean City. So how good was Mewtwo actually? You're kidding, right? I feel like I shouldn't have to say it at this point. Mewtwo is the only Pokemon to be Ubers for every single generation, and at certain points, it was likely the best Pokemon in the game. Its Amnesia set from Generation 1 is most likely the single most destructive force in Pokemon. Sure, along the years there have been a few new threats, like Deoxys, Kyogre, Xerneas, whatever, but Mewtwo adapted, first through its sheer versatility, and then in a more confined way with its Mega evolutions. Now, is Mewtwo the best Pokemon ever? I don't know. It depends on your definition of ever. Mega Rayquaza exists after all. Primal Groudon's easily the most common Pokemon in Ubers right now, and you have to go down a bit to find Mewtwo. But when you think of Pokemon, when you think power, adaptability, intelligent play, I'm gonna guess if you got the same snarl of snots in your brain that we do, you think Mewtwo. The fact that this video is as long as it is, with only being allowed in 2 VGC years, is a testament to that, and a testament to how powerful Mewtwo is. unless you play Melee. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content, and as I always say, comment on what Pokemon you want to see next. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. Yeah, I'm tired. See you next time, everyone.